Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Some of you are here again, which is wonderful. And we're here at the very first ever LAC Summit. We've got a whole week of sharing and learning. So I'm so glad to see so many of you coming back. I hope you keep coming back because each of our sessions are going to be such excellent learning opportunities for everyone. And the more that everyone can come and participate, the more we can all learn. So before I jump in and hand over to Aaron for this session, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about this summit, why we're doing it, who we are. So my name is Emma Burns. I am the coordinator of professional learning at Consilience, which is the sponsor of this event and the company that runs the Learning Analytics Collaborative. And so I know that on the call we have some people who are part of the Learning Analytics Collaborative, and thank you so much for being here. Some people who maybe are not part of the collaborative yet, but please reach out and we'd love to talk more about it to you. What you can see just from being here and being on this call is that one thing that makes the LAC really special is the fact that we really are a community. We create a learning community where we can learn and grow together. And that's what we're here to do today. So for anyone who's not already aware, the LAC is a platform and a service for schools who want to use the power of learning analytics to improve and transform schools. So our mission is to support schools to build cultures of data use, which is, of course, what we're talking about all day today. And the way that we do that is we're really focusing on helping schools to use data to make an impact. So we start by collecting all the data that you have in your school. And we've realized that schools have so much data, not just academic data, but also demographics, well-being, anything you've got. And then we collaborate with schools to figure out the best way to present that data as information so that you can find the answers that you need. Then we teach the users how to use that information. So we provide protocols and training and other tools so that your community can gain insight about your learners. So we have over 100 visualizations in the LAC platform, and each one of those has been customized to answer the questions that schools have. So we have dashboards for teachers that want to get to know their students. We've got dashboards for specialists like EAL and learning support to track interventions over time. We have dashboards for admin and board, marketing, HR, people that need to see that aggregate data. And we also have dashboards for parents and students who want to see their learners' trajectory over time. So we have over 50 schools in the collaborative, and we're all about sharing the learning. So what happens is that one school develops a protocol or develops a use case, develops a customized visualization, and then we share that information with the other schools so that everyone can learn and grow. And one of the ways that we're doing that today is, of course, sharing these learning journeys at our Cultures of Data Use Summit. And so I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. This is Aaron Boyle. He is the Director of Data and Analytics at International School of Beijing, which has been a LAC member school for a few years now. And he's talking about how they use data to bring meaningful professional reflection. I think I didn't put the whole title on your promo picture. Sorry about that, Aaron.
Not at all.
So I'm excited to pass over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Emma. Nice to see everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. It's afternoon here in Beijing. And as Emma said, I'm Aaron Boyle, the Director of Data and Analytics here at the International School of Beijing. I'm going to do a couple clicks, bear with me, to bring up what we'll be looking at together today. Is that showing up all right for folks?
Yeah, we've got that.
Great. Great. So yeah, what I wanted to share about today was this idea of bringing data to the table for meaningful professional reflections. It's something we've been thinking about over the past couple of years here at ISB and been trying some things and building out some strategies and developing some data that can serve this purpose. And it's certainly an ongoing thing for us. We've made some beginnings and we've got some ideas for what's ahead. And I want to just share where we are on that journey. And hopefully we'll have some time for some discussion too, if you have questions. And I honestly have questions I want to put to the group to see if you have some input along these lines from your experiences that we would certainly find beneficial here. I want to be clear about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about professional reflections here as we launch into this topic. What it looks like here for us at ISB is this is the core of our performance review process, or like performance evaluation, sometimes people are calling it. But for most teachers, these are the set of steps that they're doing in ways that can help them have those professional reflections, be thinking about growth with their supervisor as they move through their careers here at ISB. And it's anchored, as we can see here, like in a beginning of year conversation with supervisors where teachers are solidifying goals, getting ready for the year ahead, and an end of year conversation where they reflect with their supervisor on what progress they've seen, what thoughts they're having, and what kinds of things they're looking ahead to next as they think about their professional growth and their professional goals. In between those two anchor meetings there are a series of classroom observations where supervisors are visiting and observing instruction. And that, of course, informs the conversations and the process that's going on. My role, the role of the data office here at ISB, is to really guide and deepen those conversations by providing data that can literally be on the table in those conversations and really help enrich what teachers and supervisors are digging into, with the goal of that bringing some clarity and helping them get to a good place in what can come out of those conversations in regards to teacher growth and ongoing professional development. Ideally, what we're aiming for with that data is, as listed here, to just more clearly discern patterns, helping teachers and supervisors get a more clear sense of what's going on. Obviously, there's so many things happening in classrooms, and it's not always easy to be able to discern what's happening over time and what's happening for different groups of students. So we try to bring data that helps make that part of the conversation. We try to bring data that helps teachers and supervisors consider additional perspectives beyond their own experience. Of course, their own experience is very important, and it's often the thing in the front of their minds. But what else can we bring forward to be alongside that experience and make sure that they're making a full set of considerations in those professional reflections? And we also strive to ground these discussions and the ideas about next steps in concrete instructional details. That's where the high leverage moves are. That's where the growth can really have an impact on students. We want to help guide the conversations, and we bring data to help that be the way things are going. So before I get further into a lot of specifics around just sharing some more about what that really looks like for us and what that data is like, I do want to think about the surrounding culture of data use. Of course, as Emma was saying, that's the theme LAC has laid out for us in this virtual symposium. And then, as I'm sure folks are feeling and aware of, when we're talking about bringing data into a performance review process, into these types of professional reflections, the surrounding culture of data use has large implications for how people experience that, how people are going to engage with the data around that. And there are many places where data in these types of processes starts to be a high stakes accountability system, where that's not what we're trying to do. And so we try to be explicit about that. It's often the first thing that might hop into mind for people when we're thinking about data along these lines, but we try to be explicitly not setting things up that way. So what we are steering away from as we do our process is, one, having only a focus on like summative final student outcomes. Certainly that's something that we're looking at. And we're thinking about and valuing all the other forms of data that are underneath that and around that, and that becomes part of the conversation. We're not trying to just have a narrow focus on final outcomes. Also, the measurements we're making are not to rate and sort people. We're trying to inform conversations. We're not trying to just like place people in buckets and then make decisions based on that. We're trying to help people think about their own growth and make sure that things are moving forward in that fashion. And also, we're not thinking about directly connecting results to carrot and stick kind of policies. It's not about like, here's this target and here's the number, your number is lower, so you've got these kinds of punitive things, or your number is higher, so here's all these incentives. We're not moving with those carrot and sticks to try to enforce some policies. That said, it feels important to establish that contrast. It definitely, when these things are in place, it can lead teachers to not feeling fully seen, to feeling deprofessionalized by a rote process, and in turn, feeling resistant to investing in the process. We want to do something else. So I've established this contrast about what we're avoiding, but it doesn't say what we're doing. That's obviously the much more important question. What is it that we are doing in our process? So again, to attend to these cultural considerations and to uphold a culture that sees teachers as professionals who can draw upon evidence for constructive reflections and decision making, these are the key values and principles that we try to hold in mind so that we can be setting up a system within a culture that supports this professionalization and this constructive evidence-based conversation. The ways that we're looking at that is using multiple forms and sources of data that can be considered alongside of each other. So again, not just final student test results. We'll pay attention to that. And we're drawing upon many other forms of data that can help paint a full picture and allow for the types of triangulation that can really start to bring meaning to patterns and help people think about next steps. We're also presenting data simply and descriptively to serve as conversation starters. The goal is, like I said, to help people have a really clear idea of what's going on and what's going on in the complex system of a classroom. But we're not looking at this level. We're not looking to like analyze results against targets or other kinds of benchmarks, but just really to help build that clarity and build a shared understanding for teachers and supervisors to dig into this together. And a key thing is that we keep teachers central in making meaning of this data in thought partnership with an instructional leader. So we're not like taking the data and plugging it into some algorithm that's going to spit out next steps. The data is considered by the people who are contextualized in all of its complexities, all of its limitations, and through a constructive dialogue can get to a determination of what makes the most sense to do. Those professionals can make those decisions being informed by this data. We don't want this to be data that just like happens to people. We want it to serve people and to serve the conversations that help them grow. That's the intent. So to get into a little bit more about like, all right, what does this look like at ISB? What are we talking about when we're talking about bringing data to the table? It's been a process that's evolved over time, and we've in the past couple of years in trying to attend to those considerations of a surrounding culture and build out more of what can be happening in terms of the data that's used for professional reflections. We've done some steps. So I just want to lay out like the timeline of the past couple of years and give you some samples of what that has looked like. So up until a couple of years ago, the teachers' goal setting and professional reflections were based on a student survey that was organized by an external company. And the teachers would get results from that survey, and they would kind of look through it and note some areas of glows and grows, some positive and negatives, and they would bring that to their professional reflections with supervisors. And it was a discussion around what teachers had pulled from their student survey results, and that's what led to goal setting and reflection. And really, that was the extent of the data that was formally included. People were, of course, like drawing upon other things, but in terms of like the data that was literally on the table, that's what it was. The head of school at that time felt like there was room for more data in the process. So in 22-23, we started to apply some of those guiding principles I was talking about to think about, all right, what more can we be including here? And we took a couple of steps. This was 2 years ago now. We brought supervisors into the loop on the student survey results so that, again, it was more of that dialogue, a thought partnership with an instructional leader around, okay, what are we both seeing in this data here of these student survey results? What do we think that can lead to in terms of next steps and ideas for goals and further reflections? And in trying to get more than one data source on the table, we were working to get observations and the ways that supervisors were doing observations and what they were finding out and learning from those observations to get that more directly involved in the conversation. So to do that, observations had been in place, but not with a full amount of consistency. So to bring more consistency across different supervisors and over time, school leaders in this 2022-23 school year established an observation framework that laid out instructional expectations and really anchored the observation process. I want to share that with, oops, yeah. So here's just a quick glimpse of that. This is just one section of that observation framework. There are 4 domains in all. This one is about how students are engaged in thinking during the class. And please don't try to read all the words. Sorry, this is not big enough at all for reading the words. And my intention here is just mainly just to familiarize you with the structure of this. So what we have, there's these 4 different domains. Each domain has, you can see kind of the bold words there. They're more specific instructional considerations within each domain. And then there are descriptors, which, sorry, are too small for you to read right now, but there are descriptors of what is that expected to look like? What are our ISB community expectations for that instructional area, that instructional consideration? And then there are some descriptors going to the left in what you see of what it looks like when a teacher maybe isn't yet hitting the mark of those community expectations. What are some of the ways that that might show up? And over on the right, it's what does it look like in those moments when, you know, like when the magic is happening, like all things are clicking and falling into place, and there's a particularly powerful learning experience. We don't, that it's not that that's the expectation of that should be happening all of the time. When supervisors are going in, they're looking at that middle column and looking for those things, and then noting when things are happening to the left or to the right of those community expectations. But we want to just be able to capture when that's there, when those like transcendental, those transcendental moments of higher performance just all come together. Can we capture that to be able to learn from that? But again, it's not the expectation that everybody should be doing that all of the time. This framework, though, so once we had that framework in place, it allowed us to get a little more consistent with how we were discussing that observation data. It allowed us to bring that into those conversations. And sorry, all your lovely faces are covering that part of the slide I want to see. I'm going to move you. Sorry, there we go. Moving into last school year, now we started to put some more steps into place. So building from those initial shifts of 2022-23, we went a little bit further. We had that new observational framework in place. So we wanted to bring the feedback from students into closer alignment with what that observation framework was talking about, what those instructional expectations are. And of course, like, we can't ask students about every aspect of those instructional expectations. Like, students aren't going to be able to speak deeply about teachers' differentiation across various learners, but students can and very much should speak to what the classroom climate is like and what opportunities they have for academic discussion and what clarity they feel from the teacher in terms of expectations for their work and other things like that. So we identified the points of the instructional expectations from that observation framework that feel like students could speak meaningfully to. and designed a new survey to gather student feedback in a way that's aligned to those instructional observations, and really helps those two things to exist in concert with each other and to be able to triangulate and build more meaning around those instructional considerations. And teachers have expressed a lot of appreciation for that new survey and the way that it speaks to the kinds of things that supervisors are thinking about and what teachers and supervisors are talking about in the midst of observations and those debriefs. What it starts to look like, this is what teachers receive. Here's a sample of, after a survey, they get this description of, for the various survey items, what are the distribution of student responses. And again, this is keeping with our principle of just being simple and descriptive with the data. We're putting this in front of teachers and supervisors so that they're able to make their meaning of it. It just depicts the straight up distribution there. Sometimes teachers have asked for a reference point, and in those cases, we've given them the divisional average. Like, if it's a high school teacher, what's the high school distribution across all high school responses? Like, we've got an N of over 1,000, and that becomes a reference point, but only when it's requested by the teachers as part of their meaning making, a part of how they want to engage with the data. But this is put on the table now as some more information about what are your students talking about in terms of these instructional expectations that are there. There's also, we do the survey twice, once in the fall, which serves more in the goal setting process, and then again in the spring for teachers to have available as part of their year-end reflections. And there's not an expectation that like everything should be going up from fall to spring, but in cases where teachers have been working on a particular thing, they're paying attention to the comparison between those two data points, and that becomes part of the reflective process that they want to be doing. The second piece of data that we have, like I said, the student survey is now aligned to that observation framework. So those two data sources can be considered alongside each other. And with the more consistent observations supported by that framework, one goal that we have for data usage is to help lift up patterns that happen in aggregate across different class periods, across even sometimes different observers. Can we put together those observations in a way that can help illuminate some of the patterns that might be there? Right now, this is one area in development. We're currently in the process of migrating our observation notes to a new platform, and we aim to use that to develop some visuals to help engage teachers and supervisors. But before we get there, one thing that we've been experimenting with is doing some heat maps. Again, as a simple descriptive way just to present to teachers and supervisors, all right, here's the aggregate view of what observations have looked like. So let me show you a quick example. There we go. This is one sample of a heat map that shows the 4 different domains of the observation framework. And then just based on the intensity of the color there, how often a supervisor was like circling that area or annotating this particular area for those instructional considerations. Where was it following on that continuum of our ISB instructional expectations, or leaning a little bit to one side or the other side? And in bringing to light these types of patterns that happen across different class periods, or like I said, in some cases across different supervisors for a particular teacher, it can just help enrich those conversations, especially when we can look at the patterns of what students are saying, look at the patterns of what's showing up in these classroom visits, and put that all together to try to build a fuller picture of what's going on, and lead to some more conversation starters about what teachers and supervisors can be thinking about within these professional reflections. The third piece that we started introducing is to continue filling out this picture with multiple sources of data. We started to bring in evidence of academic growth, drawing upon student academic data to see where do we see evidence of growth, how much growth, and what else does that tell us in terms of important considerations for teachers and supervisors to be discussing as they move through this process? Now, honestly, this is not surprisingly, this is where some of the wariness about the culture and purpose of data usage can come in the strongest, where people start to have the feelings of like, oh, wait, is this some high stakes accountability where you're going to put me in that bucket or that bucket, depending on whether or not I hit this level or that level? And so again, we've had to double down on like, this is our purpose here. And this is our vision for what this is, that we are enriching professional conversations and bringing constructive dialogue between teachers and supervisors for that to drive what's going forward for professional reflections and professional goals. So we've been mindful about how we are starting to introduce this form of data. We haven't done it with everybody. We piloted it mostly in the middle school last year. They felt ready to bring student data into those professional reflections. And it's certainly an area where we're going to continue to develop more ideas. I want to show you a sample, though, of what that looked like. This is one way that we were looking at it with middle school math teachers, pulling in from MAP the fall to spring changes in RIT score in those instructional areas that folks are probably familiar with within that math MAP test that students are taking. Again, this is keeping it simple and descriptive so that we can leave the meaning making to that conversation between teachers and supervisors. We had another chart that we tried out where we were drawing upon the projected growth and putting that alongside the actual growth and the way that the map offers you that kind of that growth projection, and then you can do that comparison. But we got feedback from teachers that it felt too evaluative. It actually just it kind of started turning the conversations in different directions. So we've backed off that direction for now, just to really help teachers feel secure and them being the ones that are making meaning of this alongside their supervisors. So we've got this just like simple, descriptive. Here's where the students were in the fall. Here's where they were in the spring. And we do it over where we can. We do it over multiple school years just to help account for the inherent limitations that we know are present in this type of data in any single year. We know there's variation. So if we can be looking at more data, we can get a better sense of what's going on. And teachers found it interesting to think about like, oh yeah, this class did feel a little bit further ahead in that. And now we can see the type of growth that was happening. So with those assurances in place, we've heard that it felt helpful for teachers to have this on the table and to really just go deeper and get grounded in what could be serving students best. And we're going to just keep developing ideas about providing data along these lines to help serve these reflections moving ahead. So here we are over time. This is the full picture now. We've expanded the amount and types of data that we're putting on the table for these professional reflections between teachers and supervisors. We've been striving to build more clarity and more alignment and helping those conversations to be as constructive as possible. And we will continue to work to make those reflective conversations drive as much growth for our teachers and growth for our students. So as we are looking ahead, we want to keep building on this work. There are a few areas for refinement already emerging from our experiences of last year that we're thinking about this year, and then some further developments as well. So for instance, the language of the observation framework and some of the related survey items for specialist teachers, like for our performing arts and our physical education teachers, some of it didn't quite feel like the right match and didn't quite feel like it was giving information that felt meaningful for them to reflect on, just given the different curricular and instructional realities of what their students experience and what their classrooms look like. So we're working on making some differentiations there to help the data that comes out of those processes feel as useful as possible to everyone. We also want to expand the sources of academic data to serve professional reflections. We've done it with MAP a little bit, and we're starting to think more about how to do that. But for us, that's grade 3 through 9, and only the teachers who are thinking about math and literacy. So obviously that leaves out a lot of people. We want to start thinking about drawing upon IB data, other early literacy data for some of the younger, the lower elementary teachers. But that would be one area, honestly. I'm about to kick it over for questions. And if people have thoughts on additional data sources that they've seen used beyond MAP for these types of purposes, I would be super appreciative of hearing any thoughts along those lines. We also, as teachers through this process, are setting some individual goals, some specific ideas of types of growth they want to see in more granular ways. We want to be able to plug in with them and help customize some data collection that can help inform some of that individual goal reflection and tracking some of the progress on some of the teacher directed goals that they feel like would be important for their growth. And then outside of teaching faculty, we want to think about how to set up analogous resources, analogous data to help serve the professional reflections of our counselors, our librarians, our instructional coaches, other people for whom the observation framework and feedback from students isn't exactly the thing. But how can we get feedback from their constituents? We've set up a couple of surveys for, like, the coaches are doing surveys of their coachees in ways that feed into their professional reflections now. How to draw out more supervisor perspective on their practices, and get evidence of progress towards their intended impact, which is also aligned with student growth, but the MAP scores aren't exactly going to speak to their intended impact. So how can we get some more data that's specific outside of the classroom to contribute to the professional reflection processes for these folks? That's the story of what we've been thinking about and the kinds of ideas that we're trying to hold on to make sure that this is going in constructive directions for our teachers and the support that their supervisors are providing them. We've been trying out some stuff, learning some things. I hope it's helpful for you to see some of those samples and hear about some of the ideas, but I would love to hear if folks have any questions or things to clarify coming up out of this. Or, like I said, if you've got suggestions for me about any of this, about how to uphold these principles in ways, or sources of academic data that you've seen put into use like this beyond MAP, that's one thing we're really grappling with right now. And then that idea for the non-classroom faculty, if you've seen interesting ways to support the constructive, reflective process for non-classroom faculty, we're digging into that as well this year. So thank you for your time and attention to listen to our story there. And I'd love to hear any questions or suggestions you're able to offer on this topic. Maybe I'll stop sharing my screen so we can open it up. Emma, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to this
No, thank
process.
you. Thank you, Aaron. That's so great. It's so interesting to see like a totally new way for me of thinking about things like map data and other student data, and thinking about like what other meaning can we make from that. And I think something that stuck out to me was really the idea that at all the stages you kept going like, okay, is this actually what we need to help teachers be better teachers? And if not, like, let's go back and refine the process. So yeah, really great example of that kind of getting all the stakeholders involved in developing that. So thank you very much for
Thank
sharing.
you.
I see we have a question from Nick.
Mm.
Uh, he likes the steps, Jenny, you took and how to look at it with the focus on teacher growth and data literacy. Yeah, did you want to add any more, Nick?
Hey,
Yeah,
Nick.
no, I just wanted to say thanks, first of all. I'm in Hong Kong here, so we're somewhat similar
Hey, neighbors.
context. I'm just south of you. And just looking at the way you did it, you had mentioned too, perhaps ways to bring in other sources of data, maybe other
Yeah.
than mathematics, and like below, say, grade 3, where you're doing map and stuff like that. I guess it all depends too on what you're doing at the school. Like for us, that could come in. You could do more with mathematics, like lower than grade 3, say, if you do any sort of like number sense screeners or
Yeah.
anything like that. It all depends on, like, what you're using at the school. We're a Canadian school here. I'm at CDNIS down here in Hong Kong. So like we're doing Ontario curriculum, obviously. So, the stuff that we have for math is kind of focused more on Ontario. And then things like, if you're using, say, for instance, Words Their Way or some similar type
Yeah.
of, phonics type program, those kind of pieces. on-demand writing samples and, your rubric scores from that. Thinking to, in the realm of like the really little guys with like phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, if you're using something like Hegarty or something like that, they've got their actual assessments that kind of go along with that. So, you can definitely like enrich it with a lot of other data points. And, I'm fortunate enough to have, a good data person here that I rely on all the time, that she helps to put it all together. So a platform like LAC, we used to use LAC actually in Taiwan where I was before. And I see Peter on here too, he was our trainer. But I think that, as many data points as you can, like you said, you want to triangulate.
That's the idea.
So
Yeah.
those are the kind of ones that we use on the lower grades. Hey, Peter, on the lower grades, that's what we try to use. And it's tough too with the little guys. Like, I always want it to be, you know, data informed, but student driven, not data driven, so it's good if you can have as many pieces. And it's hard sometimes with teachers say, oh, I'm not in a map grade, so I don't have that map data, so we don't have to worry about this whole data
Right.
conversation.
Right.
And that's
Right.
kind of a scary thing to hear. But yeah, I mean, I think you guys had a really good, I love the way that like from 22, 23, how you kind of like built upon it and got like deeper and deeper, but the teachers had a real big voice in how you were using the data and actually what was useful for them. Like if something's not useful for your teachers, why really analyze it so deeply if they're not going to get it and be able to run with it? So yeah, I just want to thank you. It was a good session and good to see what you guys are doing up there at ISB.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I appreciate those thoughts.
Yeah, to go
Josh,
for
you
it.
got your hand up.
Thank you. No, I think I agree. It's great to see this being used in that way. I would strongly recommend as well seeing Ben Marsh's presentation. He's going to be talking a lot about teachers' efficacy, and he used MAP extensively in his school in Myanmar. We actually helped him to develop something called MAP Value Added Engine that looks at student growth and achievement per teacher, and he used that as a way for teachers to actually see the impact they may have on student learning. So yeah, do have a look. But yeah, look forward to all the collaboration going forward.
Great, great. Thanks. Yeah.
We got any other thoughts or questions for Aaron before we wrap up? All right, well, I might stop the recording. And